voorheen in grensoorlog.
At one stage, Magnus Bolan said that the South African apartheid government faced 4 threats. First, the South African Communist Party. Second, Mkhonto we Sizwe. Third, the ANC. And fourth, the End Conscription campaign. And when he said that, we knew we were doing something right.
Het is dikwijls van een unpopular war. Die grensoorlog was een unpopular war. Mensen kunnen ook een argument uitmaken. Het was eigenlijk een baie gewilde oorlog geweest. Het is eerst in de 80e jaren toen die Weermacht betrokken geraakt het in die townships. Dat er al hoe meer vragen gevraagd oor wat is die functie van de Suid-Afrikaanse Weermacht en al hoe meer kritische vragen oor apartheid en die verband daarmee in die Weermacht.
Weerstand teen diensplig het baie stadig stoom opgebou in Suid-Afrika. Brett Merdell was een van die stigters van die End Conscription campaign. Hulle grootste probleem was die uiters streng perke van die wet.
Back in 1982, the Black Sash held a conference in Grahamstown where they issued a statement calling on the state to end conscription. We realized in a late night discussion in the graveyard of Grahamstown, one could not say, do not obey your call up, but one could say to the state, do not call people up. And so it turned the tables completely. It was then a call that escaped the law, and that became the basis for the End Conscription campaign.
Engels sprekers het baie breër verwysingsraamwerk gehad en in daardie stadium in die 70er en die 80er jare. Die Engelse pers was deurgaans krities geweest oor die nasionale party, terwyl die Afrikaanse pers die Weermacht heeltemal ondersteun.
Die algemene verbintenis van die Engelssprekende gemeenskap tot die onderhoud en ondersteuning vir al sy morele grondslae was nie op dieselfde pyl as die Afrikaanssprekende gemeenskap. Dit was 'n boerestaat as jy wil.
Soldaat wees was op 'n manier deel van Afrikaner identiteit. Diensplig was bekend sedert die Anglo-Boereoorlog, toe Afrikaners ironies genoeg van die eerste vryheidsvegters in Afrika was.
Elke burgerlike, manlike burger bo 18 was dit was nie formele diensplig dat hulle moes gaan kampe doen elke jaar of formeel opgeroep is elke jaar nie. Maar as 'n oorlog uitbreek, dan kan jy sê dit was 'n formele conscripsie geweest of formele diensplig. Die hele kommandostelsel en die boere-weermachtstelsel van elke boer is eintlik ook 'n vegter. Daardie idee het vir lank voortgeleef tot relatief onlangs toe in die Suid-Afrikaanse kruisgeskiedenis.
Die groot meerderheid Afrikaners het dus die NP-regering van die 70s en 80s gesteun. Maar selfs onder Engelssprekendes het slegs 'n handjievol geweier om weermag toe te gaan.
So hulle was so 'n tussengroepering as jy wil, wat nie danig ernstig was as 'n steungroep vir die louwarm vir die regime nie, maar ook nie danig beskikbaar om gemobiliseer te word teen die regime deur die uitdaging wat gekom het van die ANC, die UDF en alle sogenaamde bevrydingselemente in die politieke landskap nie.
Hoekom was daar so min weieraars?
You know, it is a good question because any young South African at that time could have opened their eyes. They could have seen what the police were doing in the townships. So the argument that one didn't know, was it valid? The question was, did one bother? And the reason I bothered, I believe, was because of my mother. My mother had a strong understanding of what is right and wrong.
Dion Opperman verstaan presies hoekom so min jong mans daardie keuse gemaak het.
Because jy moet afkak as jy nie wil gaan nie, of jy moet die land verlaat. En dis hoekom 'n mens nie te arrogant kan wees nie, want ek sukkel om morele oordeel te vel oor mense of oor enige iemand, want ek persoonlik voel dat ek was in 'n baie morele gecompromised posisie gewees op baie grens. Ek het nie gesuffer vir my principles. My ervaring is dat die groter meerderheid mense 'n ongelooflike hel en morele konflik sal verduur voordat hulle eintlik oorgaan tot I'd rather die than do this. Die wil tot lewe is enorm in mense. So, I have compromised myself there.
Hy het in 1980 begin diensplig doen. en 5 maande op die grens deurgebring.
Maar my eerste ervaring toe waar ek toe gesien het tot watter vlak van dekadensie die Afrikaner politici in die kerk geval het, was toe ek vir die eerste keer op die grens was en ons was by 'n plek met die naam Ogongo en daar was hierdie in die middel van die groot basis, maar met sandwalbasis, 'n sandwalbasis gewees. Het hulle hierdie enclosure gehad met jy weet doringdraad, maar met sak in verweef in die doringdraad, maar hoog, seker so 15, 12 voet hoog. Waar sodat jy nie kon insien nie. En in hierdie enclosure het hulle hierdie gat gehad. Hy was seker so 10, 11 voet diep. En hy was uitgevoer gewees met Bedford tires, die rubber tire, so op mekaar, al die pad op tot grondvlak toe. So die sand kon nie inval in die gat nie, hy so diep gat so tot onder. En dan het hulle so igloo van sandsakke om hom gehad, sy mond, en dan bo in 'n val deur, so, jy weet, so 'n trapdoor. En ons stap toe na die igloo toe en hierdie Engelse intelligence kaptein sê, come let me show you something really cool here, sê hy. En daar was 'n veldtelefoon, maar die so draai, jy weet met 'n handvatsakkie, so in die ou dae op die plaas foon, en hy genereer mos elektrisiteit. En daai draadjie gaan so in die gat, en daaronder in die gat was daar hierdie, is daar 'n vyandsoldaat gewees, kaal, met hierdie telefoondrade, met hierdie elektriese drade om sy vingers, maar die ou sê, you know, these actually too fucking stupid to know that they can just take it off. He thinks if he takes it off, he'll die, so he leaves it on. But now we've trained him. So dan skokkel hom so, en dan kom hy op. Toe kom toe, na so hele rukkie, hy klim toe soos 'n aap net in die kante van die rubber se binnekant so op, so, jy weet, so binne. En toe kom die ou uit die gat uit so, maar jy kan sien, daar's absoluut niks wat aangaan daar nie. Sy gat is rou geslaan met 'n rottang. En hierdie Engelse kaptein sê, you see, we take their soul out, and then we put a new one in. Nou ja, ek het probleme gehad met hierdie, toe gaan ek na die kapelaan toe, wat in die basis is. Dan was my regtig problematies, want ek sê te van die major, this is not the Geneva Convention, it's a prisoner of war, he should be in a prison camp and be kept there until the end of his war. Maar ja, nee, kak man, hy weet waar al die guns is, so ons moet hom kry, anders gaan ons ouens dood. Toe gaan ek na die dominee toe, en ek sê vir die dominee, van wat ek gesien het, en die dominee se tent, by the way, is maar net 20 meter weg van hierdie einste enclosure, anyway, okay, die kapelaan van die basis. En die kapelaan sê vir my, jy moet ophou vra, jong man. Jy doen wat jy gestuur is om te doen. En moenie moeilik maak nie. Gaan jy nou uit, vat jou geweer, en gaan dien jou God. En op daai oomblik het ek nooit weer in God geglo nie. Ever again. I decided that dis net boosheid, kak. Maar nou het jy 'n keuse, of jy probeer 'n kak veroorsaak en jy gaan DB toe en jy word opgefok, of jy gaan maar aan. En ek het aangegaan.
Brett Merdell het die teenoorgestelde keuse gemaak.
So in June 1983, I got the call-up which I could no longer postpone. I had to make the decision, and it was to object. So I went to Voortrekker Hoogte and registered the fact that I would not be reporting for duty, and they gave me a court date. When we got to Joburg, and we were going on to Voortrekker Hoogte that Friday, we got the news that Friday it had been gazetted that there was no longer a 2-year maximum sentence, but a 6-year maximum sentence. And the deal of 2 years prison for 2 years SADF was no longer on the table.
In daardie tyd het hy 'n onverwagte clandestine besoek ontvang.
In fact, by somebody who will not mind me mentioning his name, Mike Evans. And he recruited me into the ANC and said to me that the ANC had asked him, they'd actually sent him back from Zimbabwe to call me to Zimbabwe. And I traveled up looking much like a Rhodesian, in veldskoene and short pants, and trying not to attract any attention. And I went up there, I got trained in what they call military combat work. It's an underground training to keep in touch secretly. And my task was to set up in 5 cities, 5 members of an underground war resistance movement. which I did over the next 6 months, between January and June. It's quite tough recruiting people because you don't want them to say no, because you've exposed yourself. So you identify people who will probably say yes, and then gently get them to the point of that sensitive discussion where they agree. And the important thing was to give doable tasks and to keep communication to the absolute minimum, because that's when people get caught, when communicating. But what was becoming much more evident was the importance of recruiting people inside the SADF. So the 5 that I started with before, they helped me identify 5 that were now within the SADF, who then provided hard military intelligence for the next 5 years in terms of bases, fuel depots, arms depots, possible strike on bases from nearby hills within mortar range, practical, concrete military information. And those were people in the belly of the beast. They provided something which Chris Hani was then to say was the kind of information which could help turn the tide and enable MK to strike hard.
Hy is weer in Zimbabwe toegestuur.
And I had a sinking feeling in my stomach that from now on things were going to be tough. That I was on or even though I bought a 2-way ticket, it was actually a 1-way ticket out. And when I went outside, I linked up with the structures that had already trained me. And they put to me a simple question. It was now 1984. It was the year when the ANC had a slogan, every patriot a combatant, every combatant a patriot. They asked me, do I want to join MK? And I realized that that's what everybody else in the ANC was doing. And why should I be different? People who weren't in that situation would find it difficult to imagine that that was natural. But for me, it was the next step along the way to contributing to freedom.
Brett moes na Oos-Duitsland vir spesiale militêre opleiding.
And I remember spending the first couple of nights stripping an AK again and again with my eyes closed in order to have some reasonable familiarity with the weapon. And it was minus 14 degrees in the middle of some spot called The Object in East Germany, unknown as to where it was, and the 40 of us became intensely bonded for the next 6 months. We got to know each other on an emotional level, and of course we trained physically together very, very well, but we never knew our names. Everything was by code, and I still today don't know what happened to the vast majority of those comrades of mine. And it was an extreme time. I mean, as we were training, the commander would say, comrades, people are dying at home. You don't walk, you run. So there was no time for sitting around. There was an acute realization that it was 85, that the country at home was in flames. And here we were training in the ice of the GDR. And there was a desire to get back, to fight. And there was a mythology as to what one would do when one went back. Everybody had this idea that they would die in a hail of bullets in an encirclement of SADF, taking many SADF soldiers with them as they went.
Vir Dion Opperman het die weermagopleiding in Suid-Afrika intussen die normale verloop geneem.
Maar toe gaan ek af uitsering toe na die leierskursus daar en ek raak, ja nee, nou gaan ek offisier word, lekker, dit is wat, nou gaan ek train om dit te word. En ek sê altyd, ek het baie komplekse verhouding in my kop met die weermag per se.
Nadat hy sy meer verloor het met 'n sersant, was hy baie skielik nie meer op pad om offisier te word nie. En toe word ek 'n seiner. En toe word ek 'n korporaal. En ek word toe die majoor se seiner / fucking doen enigiets wat ek sê persoon. In Oos-Duitsland het die einde van Brett se tyd al hoe nader gekom.
I remember one night towards the end of the 6 months, I had this terrible nightmare. Essentially, I dreamt I was back in the country and living secretly and preparing underground communication. And the rain dripped in through the window on my shoulder. And I put my hand to my shoulder and saw it was blood. And I looked up to where my bunk bed was, and I went to see the source. And I saw my body in the bed with a bayonet in the back. And I knew then, I woke up in a sweat, that I was in the killing business. I was being trained to kill. Either I was going to kill somebody or I would be killed.
Dion se realiteit was dikwels ewig gruisam. By geleentheid het hulle in die bos op 'n groep insypelaars afgekom. As syner het hy die ruitverwysing deurgegee na die basis. Kort daarna was die helikopters daar.
En die choppers, gunships, hulle het mos twee wat so uitsteek so. Kom in en hulle sirkels en ek hoor jy sê die Engelse wat die kander is weer Engels snaaks nog. En hy sê, hy sê there we go. I see 6 of them. 1, 2, yeah, 6 say. Hy sê okay. En nou al die boek aan ons nou nou lê ek op die grond en kyk na die chopper so. En hy raai ding so en hy sê maak hy so en die chopper maak so. I say that's 2. That's 3. That's 4. That's 5. Hy tel hulle so baie stil. Hy sê I'll shoot the 6th one's leg off so we can ask him something. Shoot hom so. En hulle net begin wegbeweeg, toe sê die ander chopper, hey, I see 4 more. Okay, sê die Engelse ou. Hy sê, okay, well, let me take this one out. En hy skiet die ene wie se bene nou afgeskiet het. En hulle oor soontoe en weer, is 1, chopper, skiet hulle in die 4, en die 10de ene, sy been skiet hy toe af. En dan gaat hulle weg as gunshot, dan kom 'n groot chopper in, om die Puma, of hier is, ek dink daai is Alouettes gewees as ek reg onthou, maar Puma groter man, hier lê die ou nou met sy been afgeskiet, maar hy is obviously in 'n toestand van skok anyway, want sy been is weer by die knie afgeskiet. En hy stap na hom toe, en hy sê, hy vat sy voet, en hy skop hom in sy afbeen, waar sy been af is, en hy skop hom so, maar die ou is in sulke skok, ek dink nie, hy het eers iets gevoel nie, want jy weet jou, adrenalien skop jy mos totaal in 'n ander toestand in. En hy buk so oor hom en hy maak 'n gwel. Hy maak so. En hy laat die gwel so uit sy mond so val. Op die ou se gesig so. En ek onthou nog daai ding soos 'n slak oor sy gesig geloop het so op sy swart vel. En hy sê vir hom, ja, jy wil met die boer lol jou. Ek nou. So we chuck them all onto the chopper. En toe vat hulle weg. Toe loop ons verder. En jy weet, I don't know what to make of that. Die moeilikste is dat jy niks doen, jy sien. Maar wat kan jy doen? Jy kan iets doen, maar jy sal waarskynlik of geskiet word deur jou eie mense, of jy sal sekerlik opgefok word in 'n DB vir die volgende 5 jaar. And besides which, jy weet, ek was 17 en 18 jaar oud. Ek het 18 geword my tweede jaar in die army. Jy weet, nee, my eerste jaar. Ek was 17 toe ek ingegaan het. So ek het 18 geword in my eerste jaar in die army. En 19 in my tweede jaar. So ons is kinders. We little boys. En so het dit nou maar aangegaan, jy weet.
Brett Merdle het ook geworstel met die stelsel waarin hy hom nou bevind het.
No, we were comrades, and one of the guys there, Manyanyate, we got to know each other really, really well. He was caught smoking dagga, which is a huge offense, especially because you're breaking security. And he was thrown into a container for 2 weeks in the beating sun on spare rations. He barely came out alive. It was a horrific experience for him. He used to break down talking about it, and he told me about these things, and I sort of talked with him about that, and we shared a lot. And then much later, some years later, 89, I got the news that he had died as he crossed into South Africa, as he came across. No one ever found his body. Family were never told. I never, still today, don't know who he really was.
Met sy terugkeer was Brett in Zambië gestasioneer.
And one night, 3 in the morning, I was woken up by commanders and told to go to Cape Town and place a bomb in Cape Town Station. At the time of the conscripts going off to blow not only them but their families. I could not say that was the most crazy idea possible, because what we were trying to do with the ECC was to win over support, not to kill support. So I simply did not carry out that particular order.
Die ANC het min genade gehad vir oortreders. Brett was inderdaad werklike gevaar, maar sy netwerk was waardevol.
So I kept those 5 names to myself only. My immediate commander would have known the identity of them, their real identity, because security checks were done on all of those people. But command levels above that knew them only by code name and had no idea who they were or where they lived. So that was the first level of protection. The second level of protection was provided, I believe, by my membership of the South African Communist Party. I had support, in particular from Chris Hani, who was guiding the work along with Ronnie Castrol's of being cleverer and of gaining information of fuel depots, arms depots, movements of troops, times of call-up so that the Angolans could anticipate when there was a mass mobilization of SADF conscripts.
Liggaamlik was hy dus veilig. Geestelik was dit nie so maklik nie.
I too found it particularly tough to come back and to find I had nothing in common with anybody. So, you know, when I still carry my nyanyatu with me in spirit. And that's actually when I realized there's no place for atheism in my life, because the spirit of my friends, dead friends, lives with me. So kind of really changed who I am today.
Dion en baie ander soos hy is bitter.
What an amazing sleight of hand that was, eh? Jy bou apartheid, jy run 'n war, jy vat hierdie grond tot hierdie land tot in die afgrond in finansiëel in sy kyk hierdie land was bankrot teen 1994, eh? They wiped it out. Okay. The ANC has been paying back the debts of the Afrikaner apartheid government for 10 years now. All right. To fund that war. En dan kry jy 'n Nobelprys vir vrede maak vir almal. En julle gaan bly op julle groot plase wat julle gekoop het in apartheid en alles is fyn. En al die ma's wat hulle seuns verloor het, hey, we want to discuss that. Al die ons het 'n bikini reg in hulle koppe is nie, walking wounded everywhere and dead ones.
You know, all are gone and forgotten, bar a few that made it into some upper echelon of politics. But the ordinary soldier is perhaps an alcoholic, perhaps dead of alcoholism, broken family, no place to connect to, no one that could understand what they'd been through, no counseling, no support for them to find even each other. Like even now, you know, a couple of gongs were handed out. I remembered a few ceremonies, but not to the ordinary soldier. The ordinary soldier is unacknowledged and forgotten.
Stadig begin jy besef, jy het baie duur betaal. Soos dit nou maar is, uit al 2 kante jou geval. En jy is niks meer as 'n tragiese element